Hey there, welcome. This is My Best Campaign, and I'm Amanda Lee Smith, and I've got something a little different for you today. Feedback is in, and listeners are asking for more shorter trend and insights-driven podcasts in between the usual deep one-to-one interviews. And I hear you, so that's what you're getting today. I was recently invited to speak at Switchback, which has quickly become the trade show for brands in the outdoor industry, and people seem to really appreciate what I had to say, so that's what I'm walking you through today. It's a version of that talk I gave in New Orleans. This is 7 actionable insights from the world's best marketers. I compiled all of my best takeaways from almost 3 years of interviewing the absolute greats of brand and marketing on this podcast, and I distilled them into 7 things I think you should be doing right now as a marketer. And then for each one, I spelled out a brief to your brand that you can put into motion. These lessons are pulled from the top marketers at Nike, Huckberry, Salomon, Reef, Dick's Sporting Goods, Ugg boots, Half Days. And if you're new here, I still recommend listening to the entire back catalog of episodes because there's great stuff in there. But this is your cheat sheet if you want to fast track to growth right now. So here we go. These are my 7 lessons from the world's best marketers. So lesson number 1 is that truly great creative starts with strong guardrails. And if you're a parent or have a dog, you probably know this. We all thrive with tight rules and parameters. And I'll be really honest, I believe in this one so much, I built my entire business around it. Our foundational offering from day 1 at Monday has been creating these essential guardrails. And in the words of Danny Siegel, who was the first creative director at Huckberry, he says, "Give your creative team a clear purpose and a specific target audience, and then let them fly loose." So Danny built an incredible content program at Huckberry that you can hear about on a recent episode. And you can see the legacy of that program if you visit their YouTube page today. The Huckberry guy is just locked in on their crosshairs. It's absolutely clear who the content is serving. And Danny is saying that good creative leadership means holding some things tight and holding some things loose. Hold tight to a clear purpose and an incredibly specific target audience. And then as long as everyone is locked in on those 2 things, let the creative team go nuts, knowing they'll always be pointing towards your North Star. Now, a lot of early stage brands, especially ones that are founder led, they tend to think they have these 2 things in place. But when you ask to see the documents, you find out that purpose and audience are in fact locked in the founder's head. So for guardrails to really work, it takes documentation. It takes consistency. You need to absolutely commit to the elements of your core brand platform, your positioning, your story, brand pillars, key messages, personality, whatever makes up that core brand expression or brand platform. You need that and a crystal clear picture of who you're serving, your audience, your target market, your ideal customer profile. So get really specific about your primary audience. Recently, when I talked to Alicia Moore, who's the former CMO of Half Days, we talked about their Hoka and Half Days collaboration, and she said the exact same thing. At Half Days, it's all about purpose and persona. She says, when you're constantly thinking about your customer and about why you exist, it's easier not to just jump on board whatever is popular. We are always checking ourselves. We exist to make more women feel comfortable on the mountain. Perfectly captured, Alicia. So what should you be thinking about as a brand marketer? First, get super clear about what you stand for and document it. Look at it critically. And if you could swap out the name of any of your competitors and no one would notice, then your purpose probably is not specific enough. And it might need some linguistic magic layered on top. Second, don't just know your primary audience, actually codify them. And third, make sure every single person on your team knows that brand platform by heart and let them play within that sandbox. And finally, that combo of tight and loose should also apply to your budgeting. When you're planning your content, lock in the moments that matter, but don't be too rigid. Leave some time and budget to jump on opportunities. That's a lesson from Charlie Grinnell, who ran social for Red Bull for a long time, and his episode is just a wealth of insights. And speaking of budget, money, it's helpful, But it's not everything, which brings me to lesson number 2. Authenticity is more important than budget. This might sound like a cliche that small brands tell themselves to feel better about their tiny budgets, but I actually believe it. And yeah, more budget is always nicer. But I'll tell you what, if you nail authenticity, you might be surprised at who wants to work with you at a discounted rate. Agencies like Monday, my agency, we aren't cheap to work with, but when the right brand who is willing to trust us comes along, we're willing to make exceptions on price to do incredible work that we know we're going to be proud of. So let's see this in action. In the very first episode of my Best Campaign, 3 years ago, I spoke to Adam Saraceno. He was employee number 1 at Peak Design, and he's essentially led their marketing ever since. Peak Design does an incredible job of video. They're known for their YouTube and their Kickstarters, but they use employees. They shoot things in-house, and so much of the work they do is merely in the scripting, not in big production. So in Adam's words, don't put the focus on making sure everything is super polished. Instead, make things interesting. And that takes effort, but it doesn't have to cost a lot. Grassroots community building is the same. It takes effort, but you can do it for free or cheaply. And Sydney Baptista, the founder of Pioneers, he's done an incredible job of this. He was on an episode earlier this season, and he immersed himself in culture first. He started a run club years before he launched a running apparel brand. And he's still operating on a really tight budget. But instead of spending money on big brand activations, he uses his community, who also happen to be major culture drivers, and instead does really interesting events. He showed up at Paris Fashion Week and did a race called Spin Le Bloc. It was a relay race with 1 kilometer segments with prizes for the fastest, yes, but also prizes for the best outfits, for the most energy, and best cheer section. Then at Boston Marathon, when every brand was doing a shakeout run, Pioneers hosted a post-shakeout party with a DJ and coffees and great fashion, and they made a ton of shareable content of people talking about their marathon game plan and their goal pace. It was a really different perspective. And it was a lower budget activation that really landed with the Pioneers community. Speaking of marathons, I had Lee Glandorf on the podcast recently rating the best and worst brand pop-ups at the Boston and London marathons. And if you haven't heard that episode, Lee is the author of my favorite Substack, The Sweat Lookbook. And she summed this all up really well when she said, you cannot engineer the cool stuff. So her big standout in Boston was from Rabbit. And Rabbit had some budget, but they partnered with an up-and-coming artist named Zach Leitoff and basically gave him the reins to their pop-up to execute his creative vision. And he made 99 posters inspired by the race, but it wasn't an over-the-top expensive activation, but it did tap into someone who's endemic to the running community and allowed him to make something really different. It was punk-inspired and felt totally unlike any other product you would find on Newbury Street that week. And that authenticity really helped Rabbit make their mark in a crowded space. So if I'm thinking about prioritizing authenticity over budget, lesson number 2, then here's the brief to your brand. First, work with what you already have. Start with what's unique to you and special to you. So skills you have on your team, your history or your founder story, maybe your location, your back catalog, if you have, like years of product, your existing community, and build on that. Build the community first, and don't spend a lot on marketing until you're sure you have that community queued up. We've done 2 episodes of the podcast with Katie Wilson, who's the founder of Belly Welly, which is a fiber supplement brand. And she started her business by buying Facebook groups for people with irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, which is the perfect audience for a fiber supplement. I think it only cost her a few $100s, and she already had a built-in audience when she launched her brand. So the next tip is, when budgets are small, use your employees as influencers. Think about who is already embedded in the brand who can represent it. And lastly, don't forget that perfection is overrated. If it's true to your purpose and your audience, just ship it. Get your content out there, get your event out there, just put it out into the world. Lesson number 3 is that a shared vocabulary creates shared identity. And this one is personal for me. I started my brand career working for the founder of Lululemon, and I gotta say, he knew how to create a cult brand following. If you ask him how he did it, it wasn't just about the product. The product was definitely vital. He'd say the early success of the brand came down to creating a shared language. And if you've worked with anyone who worked at Lululemon back then, you'll know there is a distinct shared vocabulary. And Chip Wilson calls that linguistic abstraction, the practice of making that vocabulary. It's the words, the slogans, and phrases that only the insiders know. It's a shorthand for quick communication. And it helps you filter in the true believers and makes your culture really portable. When done well, it helps you grow, it creates cohesion with your team, and it lets your super fans self-select and start to spread the word for you. I saw that trend show up in 2 recent episodes with brand leaders who managed to create some of the most devoted followings I've ever seen. The first one is Brogan Graham, my wonderful friend and the founder of one of the world's biggest grassroots fitness movements, November Project. And we talked about language a lot in his episode. Language defined the culture of November Project. They created rituals around it. They gave everything a name. They had slogans like, just show up, we're weatherproof. They said stealing wireless, which was a term for people who come to the location but start late to avoid participating in the group dynamic or leave early so they don't have to mingle with people. And they called spice any small addition to a workout that would make it a little more fun, harder, or more interesting. And that language made the culture of November Project really portable as they expanded into new cities. Here's what Brogan said about it. Make it easy for people to carry your message. If your brand is clunky to talk about for those brand advocates who worship your product and they can't really explain in a few simple words as your unpaid spokespeople, that's the brand's fault. I also had a chat with the founder of Outdoor Voices, Ty Haney. Ty is an absolute master of giving things a name or a tagline. Like even just a little rhyme or alliteration can make something feel ownable. And she did this at Outdoor Voices. She owned simple phrases like try your best, which she shortened to TYB and made it a rallying cry for the brand and all the fans. She claimed the expression doing things and put it on their merch. They had the dog jog. They called their activations endorphin hour. Even just naming and owning the term the exercise dress. That's an example of this. It's so simple, but if you're a woman who is into fitness in the 2010s, you know that OV invented and owns the idea of the exercise dress. So as you're thinking about creating culture that can extend beyond you and your team and your brand, think about crafting language that does the heavy lifting for you. Here is the brief to your brand. Make your message simple and memorable. Don't overcomplicate it, but do document it. Define your brand voice and document your lexicon. If something matters enough to put budget and human resources towards it, like an event or promotion or a signature product, give it a name or an acronym. For example, if you're doing markdowns once a year, don't just call it a sale. Give it a name. Make it your own event. And then drive it home again and again until you're sick of it. And honestly, if you aren't sick of saying it, you probably haven't said it enough. Okay, lesson number 4 is that traditional marketing might be your secret weapon. Now, what do I mean by traditional marketing? I mean direct mail, radio, out of home. And this can work for almost any brand, but it's particularly effective if you're in retail locations or if your brand is local or location based. But if you're historically a digital first brand, and maybe you haven't tapped into what might seem like these more location specific old school tactics, but this probably is the year to try it. So back in December, I was at the running event in Texas, big running trade show, and I asked some of my marketing pals what was the single most effective thing they did for their brand this year. And Adam from Peak Design said it was good old-fashioned direct mail, and it was getting them an incredible return. And we're seeing this too. Direct mail can be a huge top-of-funnel awareness driver, but it also has a nice bottom-of-funnel component if you include a single clear promotion and a QR code. Or you can use it to drive traffic to retail if you have a physical location you want to promote with a discount. Snail mail is actually really effective if it's targeted and asking for a single specific action. And same with out of home. We're seeing wild postings, bus shelter ads, billboards. We we consistently see great results from these, especially when there's retail nearby or a very simple CTA. I mentioned Katie, the founder of Belly Welly. Her brand became famous for their hot pink billboards that just say, "Hot girls have IBS," and then the name of the nearest grocer. These billboards drove huge awareness because they placed them in spots that were easy to photograph, and also because they were positioned in close proximity to key grocers. Katie talks about it on one of our episodes. And I love this philosophy from Austin Hodges as well. Austin is formerly from Adidas, and now he's running global marketing at Nuna, the baby brand. Interesting crossover. And he says, if nobody else is doing it, we probably should be doing it. So think about that space your audience is in that no one else has jumped on. And for Austin, this is targeting moms at major sporting events. Moms or moms-to-be are already there. They're at the events, and no one's speaking directly to them in that space. So Nuna decided to own the stadium and make it a place for moms. So think about what might that untapped space be for your audience. Where are they already, and none of your competitors are reaching them at? That's really the brief to your brand for traditional marketing, but also a few more things. So firstly, direct mail is your friend. Test it on a small scale. And if you do, make sure you have one clear offer and make that offer worthwhile. If possible, tie it to a physical location. Go copy light. So resist the urge to say everything. Keep it focused. And don't forget a QR code. And then think about other traditional media you might be overlooking. Radio, transit shelters, wheat pasting, billboards, sports arenas. In a city like Portland, where I live half time, I get most of my info from the telephone poles in my neighborhood. So do not underestimate that. All right. Lesson 5 is that this is the moment to share your journey of building your business. It is a great time, if you're a founder, to build in public. And much of this, I think, is being driven by the popularity of Substack. And it's also happening on TikTok and Instagram, but Substack is kind of the place where you can really give the behind the scenes. And I know it's scary to show the messy behind the scenes aspects of business, and it can feel cringy to put yourself on social media, but I promise this is working right now. If you spent any time in the outdoor industry, then you will have come across Jen Gurecki. She's the founder of Coalition Snow. She's a wonderful shit disturber, and she was on episode 20 of my best campaign talking about Substack. And Jen recently pivoted her brand, but for the last few years, her presence on Substack has been playing a big role in her business. A lot of brands have tried to step into Substack in the last few years by using it like a brand blog, and there have been some success stories. And those successes almost always come when the founder shares their own personal narrative. I think it doesn't quite work as well when you make it impersonal or really just try to replicate what would be on a generic blog. And that's what Jen believes too. She says, "I'm increasingly convinced the most effective thing you can do on Substack is share the founder story." You can take that approach outside of Substack too. So Sydney Baptista from Pioneers, also a solo founder, and he shared about the importance of getting out of the bubble of your business and being on the ground with your community, connecting with them as the face of the brand. It not only extends your reach, it also solidifies deeper brand loyalty for your audience. They want to see the good and the bad of your journey. And Lee Glandorf gave a shout out to another founder who's doing this really well, Katie Douglas, who owns Running Wilder in San Francisco. Lee pointed to her and said, "Katie has done a really, really good job on Substack of building in public, using her story of building the brand to inspire women." And Katie hasn't been on this podcast yet, but you better believe she's on my outreach list. Because honestly, if you're a brand leader or a founder, inherently, your story is inspiring. I think anyone who takes a risk like that has a story I want to hear. And if you like to write, Substack is a great way to get it out there. If you like to yap, maybe Instagram is your way to get it out there. If you don't like either, tap a Gen Z on your team or someone's niece or nephew and just get them to interview you and let them edit it into magic. They're amazing at this. And Substack really works well when it's treated as a community building tool rather than just another sales channel. So I would focus your energy on sharing the deeper stories that don't quite fit into that quick hit world of Instagram or TikTok. And if you do it well, it can become a massive discovery engine and help you find new fans. So if we're building in public, here's the brief to your brand. First, don't sleep on Substack, but make it a perspective customers won't find anywhere else. Bring real human perspective. And I would say, unless you're just one individual building Substack as a media brand, totally valid, then don't paywall your content unless you're at the stage where you're so small, you really need the money. Secondly, start talking to the camera and putting it out into the world. Embrace being uncomfortable. The cringe is just part of the journey. And third, don't be protective. Give away your secrets. Show your mood boards, your failures, your processes. One of my favorite trade show booths in recent years was from Bandit Running, where their creative head, Ardith, walked us through her inspiration board for the season, all the tears that she had pulled initially, and then how it showed up in the fabric and the prints and the patterns. And lastly, I know the temptation is probably to bring in AI to write your Substack. Resist the urge to completely hand it off. It might be valuable, though, to use an app like Whisperflow. You can just talk into it and get Claude to then shape your own words and your own voice into an article, preserving really the integrity of your voice. I used to ghostwrite for CEOs in my early career. I would interview them, I would transcribe it, and then I would shape their words into a punchy article. You could treat AI as that ghostwriter if it keeps your voice intact. I also think obviously, AI is a wonderful research partner. So when you need an example of something to make a point, or you need to find something in your brand's archives, of course, there's so much value there. Okay, but speaking of AI, here is a piece of wisdom that feels very pertinent at this moment. Lesson number 6, don't let the algorithm determine your creative. I loved the expansive interview I did with industry veteran Nicholas Bornling back in November. Nicholas spent years at Solomon and did stints at Black Diamond and New Era and Houdini, and he warns against letting data drive your creative decisions. He says, "Today, everything is measurable. The digitalization of marketing has led us to a space where very little risk is taken. AI and the need to measure everything are leading us all down this path of uniformication. Everything's looking the same, feeling the same." And for now, I think Nicholas is right. Brian Eno calls this AI munge. Munge being the muddy color of the water when you dip a paintbrush into it over and over and all the colors blend together into a pinkish brown munge. And if you draw from the same well as everyone else, your creative is going to look like everyone else's. The real risks that pay off usually come from a few creative minds sitting in a room together, hashing it out. Nicholas talked about this in his episode. Okay, and speaking of algorithms, I think there is also a risk when we start depending too much on paid media platforms. Early in season 1, I talked to Luke O'Shea, who was leading marketing in Asia for Rafa in the early days. He was reflecting on that sort of post-COVID hit that many brands took when so many of them put all their eggs in the performance marketing basket rather than retaining a focus on organic brand building. It was a struggle to really bounce back when you became really dependent on ad spend to get in front of your audience. And Luke said, the brands that didn't invest in their brand during COVID are really battling now. All they worried about was performance marketing and immediate return on investment. And once we came out of it, all the brands that double down on story and brand, such as On Running, Arc'teryx, Tracksmith, they're seeing the windfall now. So with that in mind, here's the brief if you want your creative to stay relevant in an age of AI. Above all, real innovation takes courage and willingness to fail. You need to take creative risks instead of just letting algorithms tell you what's already working. And part of that risk might be listening to someone more junior on your team. Think about opening up the table to more voices. And this one seems obvious, but we skip it way too often. The best creative comes when we collaborate. Get everyone in a room together. And finally, don't let data kill a great idea. There might not be data to support it if nobody has tried it yet. Brand building is really a long game. You might not see the immediate return, so be persistent, give it some time. We know the higher ups love an ROI, but sometimes the major wins are just unmeasurable at the start. Okay, you've stuck on this journey with me. We're at our final insight. Number 7. Put your athlete at the center and you will always have a home run. This is actually a direct quote from one of my absolute favorite podcast guests, Julie Igarashi from episode 23. Julie was the VP creative director for women's at Nike. She actually spent 25 years at the brand. And here's what she said in full. The times where we were able to get up and out of ourselves and put the athletes in the center of our campaigns, put the people we're making it for in the center, we had a home run. Julie saw Nike through some ups and downs, but the big wins were the campaigns that put their athletes in the spotlight. You might not work at Nike, but think about who is the equivalent of your athlete. Think about your super users. They are the proxies for your broader audience. They are the source of inspiration. They're the proof of performance. Coming back to Alicia Moore from Half Days, she said their success always came from time on the mountain with their core skiers. In her words, you have to be present, to be with them, to go on the mountain, to actually ski with our women and talk to them, and then put them in the spotlight. In fact, this is what Nuna is doing with their strategy. They're focusing on athletes who are also mothers. They're showing those journeys that these women are on. And these are real stories, but they're inspirational women. Remember Austin Hodges? He's the ex-Adidas leader who went to work at the baby brand. He says, we want to tell stories of these superheroes, these women who are athletes and parents. And we want to shed a light on what they go through and how they impact the world and why they're so special. So if I'm briefing your brand on how to think about this lesson, here's what I would say. Never forget how and why this all started. Don't lose sight of your core athlete or your super user. Get out of the office, even more than you already are, and into the real world where people are actually using your product. Proactively give your community a voice. Put them in your campaigns, interview them, get product feedback from them, and don't just focus on the stars. Who are the up-and-comers? Who will be the future of your industry? Put them in the spotlight. All right, we did it. That's 7 lessons from the industry's very best marketers. Here they are. 1, the best creative starts with strong guardrails. 2, authenticity is more important than budget. 3, shared vocabulary creates shared identity. 4, traditional marketing might be your secret weapon. 5, it's a great time to build in public. 6, don't let the algorithm determine your creative. And 7, put your athlete at the center and you'll always have a home run. Thanks for sticking with me. Reach out and let me know if you want more of these kinds of podcasts in between our usual interviews. This is My Best Campaign. I'm Amanda Lee Smith, and the show, as always, is brought to you by Monday Creative. We're a brand insights, strategy, and creative agency based in Vancouver, BC, and Portland, Oregon. Our clients include Keen Footwear, Arc'teryx, Dometic, Belly Welly, and Dea Foods, or as we call them, brands that enhance human potential. This episode was produced by Emily Hybeck and edited by Andrew Bagasbas. Our theme music is by Shimon Machida. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another interview with one of the world's best marketers.